To the students, the National Board DNB students, and the postgraduate students. It's a great opportunity for me to come and tell something about the rational use of antibiotics from a person, Dr. Subhranshu Sekhar Naik. He is a great exponent in infections in musculoskeletal conditions, and he has got very well and he is so well recognized internationally because of his work on infections in orthopedic surgery. So I'm really glad that I could impress Dr. Subhranshu Mohanty, my senior, and here I am with this presentation. I have modified it slightly because we have some postgraduates here to whom we will be talking. So I right away go to my presentation. Rationalizing the use of antibiotics, it's an important patient safety and a public health issue, in addition to being the national priority. The use of antibiotic in orthopedic surgery has very important role because its important role is to treat osteoarticular infections, and antibiotics also have very important role as a prophylactic administration because in orthopedic surgery, usually we do surgery in the depth and usually we use implants or prosthesis. Understand that if what we mean by that is there is always a race between the tissue cells and the bugs, the microbes, to take over the hold over the smooth surface. But here, as we are concerned about infections, it is an important concept which we should know. The other thing is that the bacteria adherent to biomaterials with antibiotics. Now, this is very important in understanding, treating, managing osteoarticular infections because here it is important for us to know biomaterials, for example, the PMMA, the polymethyl acrylate, which is the bone cement. Now, when this bone cement is mixed with antibiotics, this particular biomaterial has a strength which is 60 times more uh, compared to if it is not used. The antibiotic is not added to the polymethyl acrylate. And so the Streptococcus aureus, if we take as a bug, it requires 60 times more strength to affect or infect the biomaterial which are added with antibiotics. So this is again a very important thing which all the postgraduates should know. Now, staying in orthopedic surgery, we are really worried about antibiotic prophylaxis. Is because it is definitely once we give antibiotic as a prophylaxis, it reduces the rate of infection from 5% to 1%. And in orthopedic surgery, none of us want any infection to happen. Again, the important thing is that antibiotics can eliminate bacteria before these bacteria go and colonize the implants and are established cellularly in the macrophages. So the lowest rate of infections are obtained by the combination of intravenous antibiotics and the use of antibiotic-loaded cement. This is a very important concept we should learn when we are talking about rational use of antibiotics, because we will go slowly into knowing what rational use of antibiotics is. So it is very important for us to understand that the local antibiotic delivery biomaterials play an important role in orthopedic practice and to prevent orthopedic infections. So what's the real reason for irrational antibiotics? Is it only we are to be blamed for that or the system is to be blamed? Now, we have very short consultation times. We do not allow for a proper diagnosis in a busy OPD. So, very short consultation time. We are not go deep into the problem. The other one is the polypharmacy. Too many medicines we prescribe per patient. A lot of things are involved. Sometimes we lack trust. sometimes on the lab which gives the report, sometimes the lab reports come late. And always as clinicians, we have a fear of failure. So we resort to polypharmacy. And patients self-medicate inappropriately. So that is where awareness is very important. Patients do not adhere to the prescribed treatment. That is again a problem, which again depends on like counseling and making them awareness. Now, apart from that, doing these factors, the factors where doctors, we are to be also so have a role to play, very important role to play. That is the prescription of antibiotics for non-bacterial infections. This is an absolutely big no. We should not be doing that. And antibiotic injections are used where oral formulation should be more appropriate. This is again not a good thing. We should go for oral antibiotics. We should not keep antibiotic injections for the real infected and the real serious patients. And prolonged prophylactic therapy. This is again an important. We should give antibiotic if at all we are giving in a clean surgery as only a prophylaxis. We should not prolong the prophylactic therapy. So the very concept of prophylactic antibiotic is lost by prolonging the prophylactic therapy. And when we prolong the empirical antibiotic treatment without clear evidence of infection, there is no clear infection. And if there is any evidence of infection, immediately the empiric antimicrobial treatment should be downscaled to the definite treatment, and we should not do that. So failure of narrow antimicrobial therapy when the causative organism is identified. This is very important. Once we identify the bug from the lab, then we should definitely downscale from an empiric antibiotic to a more definitive therapy. Well, the point which is very important for our today's discussion, the postgraduates, it is the do not follow clinical guidelines. So consultants or faculties, they have studied, they have understood. So they, of course, they follow some guidelines. And hence it is very important for the postgraduates to understand that what are these clinical guidelines. Now there is a criteria which is called a CARET criteria. This CARET criteria, if we use, then we'll definitely allow more rational antibiotic usage and therapy, and it's safe for our patients. Now, what is this CARET criteria? Is because it's a evidence-based results. It has got therapeutic benefits. It is safe. It is cost-effective, and optimal drug dose and duration. Short course is ideal and more aggressive therapy is ideal. So these are the important concepts in the CARET criteria. If we follow these, then definitely we'll not have irrational use of antibiotics. So while choosing the right antibiotic, what you have to consider? You have to consider the relevant host factors, the pathogen related factors, and of course, the drug related factors. Now, once we come to the relevant host factors and the pathogen related factors and the drug related factors, there is a rule of right. What is this rule of right? The right medicine in the right manner. That is, dose, right route, right frequency, and right duration of administration in the right patient at the right cost must be followed while using antibiotics. So these are very important things which you should always, throughout your life, you should remember. Now, once we come to the important host-related factors, the age is their important role. It plays a very important role in choosing our antibiotic for prophylaxis and also for empirical and also for definitive therapy. Now, age and immune status of our patient, that is very important for you to understand. And local factors like the pH of the wound, any presence of pus is there or not, any blood is there, any foreign body, likelihood of presence of any foreign body or any obstruction, any allergies if the host, the victim has any pregnancy or lactation, and what are the other diseases or comorbidities has, and if we can by clinical judgment what probably can be the severity of infection. So all these are host related factors which should be there at the back of our mind when we are choosing an antibiotic. Usually we have to choose that for an empirical therapy. So while considering the organism related factor, it should be decided whether what we have to understand whether this bug is a community acquired bug or it's a hospital acquired bug. And then we have to give a best guess method to be applied for empirical therapy. Now you have to be educated enough. You have to be educated enough to give this best guess. Well, otherwise you cannot give your best guess, you know. So that is again important for us to understand how important is these antibiotics to be given in what form, what dose, what strength, all that. And the results from analysis of the antibiograms in your local hospital, it is of very great importance. Whatever we have this international data, Western countries data, or even in our country where like big places like Chennai and Mumbai and Delhi, where they are more sort of proactive, and they do a lot of research, and they are more sort of they have developed the antibiogram for their centers, and accordingly they treat. So all of us, even in tier 2, tier 3 cities or small places, should be very particular about antibiogram, which is of our own local area and the hospital. And we should, again, based on that, we should kind of give our antibiotic rational use of, we should use our antibiotics rationally. Now, coming to the drug-related factors, we should know whether we are giving a bacteriostatic or a bactericidal drug. What are the possible adverse effects? And very important always is the cost of therapy. The cost of therapy, because most of at times you feel that this is all industry driven. So that is where you have to be always thinking in terms of cost to the patient in your treatment. Now I'll go few slides basic to the infection, what the postgraduate should know. So osteomyelitis, all of you know, it's infection of the bone. It is characterized by a sequestra, can be classified based on the duration of the illness into the acute osteomyelitis, which is in few days to weeks. There is no sequestra there. In chronic osteomyelitis, within a frame of months to years, so there is a sequestra there. There might be a sinus tract also. And based on the mechanism of infection, osteomyelitis can be contiguous, like following a trauma, following a soft tissue infection, following a decubiti ulcer, or it can be heterogeneous. Most often affects the long bones and the vertebral bones. Or it can be because of a vascular insufficiency, like in diabetes. So based on anatomical stage and host factors, all of you would have studied your Sydney Madder staging classification system. I'm not going into that. So with this background, what you have to again understand is the common organisms causing osteomyelitis are hematogenous osteomyelitis is usually monobacterial, single bacteria. And a contiguous osteomyelitis, like in a trauma setting or from a soft tissue, the infection goes to the bone. It may be microbial, polymicrobial. That's very important. And Staph aureus, Enterobacter species, Streptococcus species, Pseudomonas species, and the gram-negative bacilli. These are the usual common organisms which affect the bone. Now, if you note about the cultures, now please to understand the preferable to collect specimen prior to initiation of your antibiotic therapy, and only from wounds that are clinically infected. That is very important for you to understand. In case the patient is currently on any antibiotic which appears to be ineffective, it is advisable to discontinue this for 1 to 2 weeks if possible, and then go and take the specimen, collect the specimen. So again, collection of specimen, it has got so many rules in that. So you should have the standard technique to sort of collect these specimens. And the swab cultures and the Synattac track cultures, they might be unreliable because they are not very true representation of what type of bugs would be there in the inside in the bones. So you have to take the swab culture report and the sinus tract cultures with a more cautious and a more sort of a cautious look into it. And the containers which are used can be sterile screw cap container and or sterile swabs in screw capped tubes. And a swab from the wound, generally we discourage because, you know, taking this swab, it can grow skin colonizers in the growth. So we normally avoid taking swabs from the wounds. So collect the swabs only when tissue or aspirate cannot be obtained. If you cannot take a piece of tissue or you cannot aspirate something which is sort of exudate or purulent, or then you probably have to take swabs, but try to avoid swabs. And sinus tract. Sinus tract, the sample should be collected with a syringe and a needle. It should be placed in a sterile container. A portion of the sample also should be placed in a sterile tube containing anaerobic medium. So this is very important. Microbial infection, microbacterial infection, anaerobic infection. These are also things which you have to keep in your mind. And whenever you encounter clinical situation of acute osteomyelitis, blood culture should be obtained along with the wound and the bone culture for all patients who are presenting with acute osteomyelitis. So coming to this algorithm, how do you approach a patient with the osteomyelitis? Now, first we will see there is a hematogenous osteomyelitis. Usually it is usually monobacterial. So blood cultures, if they come positive, then we have two options. The infection restriction to the medullary canal of the long bones alone. What we do is attempt bone biopsy, culture sensitivity, subperiosteal aspiration. Again, we send that for culture sensitivity. And we do all this before we start on an empiric antibiotic. And once the reports come, we switch over to the definitive antibiotic and we continue here the IV intravenous antibiotics for about 4 weeks or more. And suppose from this hematogenous osteomyelitis where blood cultures are positive, now there is a concomitant joint infection or there is a subperiosteal collection and an abscess and some amount of necrotic bone. So in these situations, we have to do a surgical debridement because there is no substitute for surgical treatment of these cases, and there is no substitute through that by trying to give antibiotic to treat such infections, which is like suppressive therapy because it won't be effective in our treatment. And here the antibiotics are again given for 4 to 6 weeks. Now, suppose we are dealing with osteomyelitis, which are non-hematogenous, and when there is a hardware present, so we will go to this later. And when there is no hardware and non-hematogenous osteomyelitis, first again the surgical principles, you have to remove the necrotic tissue have to send for culture. Always please remember, any infection, send it for biopsy. Any tumor, send it for an infection. So that is very important. Tissue should be also sent for culture and a histopathological report. And placement of antibiotic beads and cement has very important role in treatment of osteomyelitis, non-hematogenous osteomyelitis in orthopedic practice. And appropriate antibiotics, how do you choose? No residual infected bone after you do your surgical work, or you have to finally go for an amputation. There is some amount of soft tissue infection, then you can add 10 to 14 days of antibiotic. There is no soft tissue infection, just about 2 to 5 days, then stop it. And when there is after the surgical debridement, still we feel that there is a residual infected bone, then we give intravenous, highly bioavailable oral antibiotics for about 6 weeks from the last debridement. So what about the septic arthritis of our native joint? Now, infection of our joint is most often due to some bacteremia. And occasionally it can result due to some direct injury to the joint, like any trauma or any therapeutic joint injections, usually commonly. But the most common bacteria which cause septic arthritis are the gram-positive, the Staph aureus being the commonest. The gram-negative septic arthritis is seen in the setting of gastrointestinal or urogenital bacteremia. So what are the risk factors where a person can develop a native joint septic arthritis? Suppose the joint is previously damaged by inflammatory conditions like rheumatoid arthritis or crystal arthropathies, gouty arthropathy, or any recent joint surgery to the joint, or comorbidities like diabetes, intravenous drug abuse, cirrhosis, chronic kidney disease, use of steroids, and sometimes skin lesions like psoriasis. So these are the risk factors for persons to have septic arthritis. Now, what few words about the prosthetic joint infection, because you have to understand all this, then only you can choose a rational antibiotic. So prosthetic joint infection is the worst complication of joint replacement surgeries. Now, why it is so? The presence of biofilms on this prosthesis makes diagnosis difficult and the treatment also very challenging. Once prosthetic joint infection is present, you have to understand one of the following criteria is present. There is a synaptic tract communicating with prosthesis, or there is presence of pus, or an acute inflammation or histopathologic evaluation of periprosthetic tissues. Two or more positive cultures with the same organism, we find that either intraoperatively and or preoperatively, a single positive culture with the virulent organism. So type of infection, if we time prosthetic joint infection, time of prosthetic joint infection, if it is usually less than 3 months, we call it as early infection, and likely source of infection is intraoperative. don't blame the patient. Most of the time we tell it is because some problem it has happened. It's not like playing any blame game with your patient. We should understand. And when the infection is between 3 to 12 months of index surgery, it's a delayed infection. It's again due to intraoperative. And when it is more than 12 months, then it is a late infection. So this can be either through intraoperative or maybe a hematogenous. So the common organism, bugs, which cause this prosthetic joint organism are the Staphylococcus aureus. Now this is more common in our Western literature, whatever we see. Coagulous negative staphylococci, again, very common in Western literature. Enterococci. In our setting, we see gram-negative aerobic bacilli quite commonly. And Propionobacterium acnes for shoulder replacements. So once we are going for in the treatment of prosthetic joint infection, intraoperatively few things which you should understand. You should take at least 3 and optimally 5 to 6 samples of periprosthetic tissue must be obtained, and they should be sent for histopathology. And the periprosthetic tissue also should be sent for culture. And sonication of the prosthetic implant will detect the biofilm organisms and improve our microbiological yield, especially in patients who have received previously antimicrobials. And now we have developed a lot of molecular markers and synovial fluid biomarkers. Are newer diagnostic modalities for culture negative prosthetic joint infection. These are the areas of very close to Professor Subhranshu Mohanty's heart. So he is much into these concepts and management and issues and understanding. And what about the biofilms? The most important consideration in management of bone and joint infection is the presence of biofilm associated with implants and with prosthesis. Now, what are the implications? The implications are antibiotic penetration into the biofilm is poor. We have to understand. Antibiotic that penetrate may not be active on the biofilm organism as they might be in a stationary phase. The biofilm organisms are protected from immune processes like phagocytosis. And the biofilm organisms can acquire resistance pattern from one another. So that's why this it has such a clinical important clinical relevance to understand what actually these biofilms cause. Now, yes, antibiotical microbial regimen used to treat bone and joint infection. Now, bactericidal drugs are preferred for deep-seated infection, like our osteomyelitis. Now, agents with good bone penetration, we should be able to get. Drugs with biofilm activity is ideal for us, which can penetrate into biofilm, action against the biofilm organisms. And the ones which are least toxic and most affordable ones should be used in view of the prolonged duration of treatment in orthopedic infections. Now, the use of local antibiotic cement special. This is a very important thing which I am trying to sort of emphasize upon, because IV antibiotic along with local antibiotic cement spacers or antibiotic impregnated beads is a very good adjuvant treatment in management of osteo, or in management of orthopedic infections, especially in drug resistant and difficult to treat bone and joint infections, because these local antibiotic drug delivery systems with lot of they can generate and dissipate a lot of local antibiotic without giving it any systemic problems. And the likely organisms after the implant surgery or the prosthetic joint infection based on interval between the surgery and the infection. Now, once we have a very early infection, less than 2 days, what are the likely organisms which we should think of? They can be the group A, Streptococcus, Clostridium perfringens. Now, here clinically, the patient will have very high fever, shock, pulleys, necrosis, gangrene, all that. Now, when it is the infection is about 2 weeks, the Staph aureus is the likely organism, or the gram-negative bacilli. Here again, you have fever, inflammation, poor wound healing. When it's a slightly delayed presentation, like 3 to 10 weeks, so usually this is a coagulous negative Staphylococcus, the non-tubercular mycobacterium. This is a very, very important thing which you have to understand in today's world with these polymicrobial infections. So this is one thing which should be there in our mind, and the Propionobacterium acnes for shoulder surgeries. So here we have persistent pain. There is a low-grade fever. Some mechanical instability is there. Probably might be patient would have developed a sinus tract by that time. And coming to the late infections, more than 10 weeks. They can be again acutely presenting or chronically recurring. So here again, Staph aureus, gram-negative bacilli, cons, and the non-tubercular microbacteriums and polymicrobial infections and fungal infections. So here there is a hematogenous seeding, and there is sepsis, local inflammation, inadequately treatment, early infection. So we should be, first of all, we should not do a half-hearted job. We have to treat it properly. Otherwise, it becomes a chronic infection. And signs of infection after bridging symptoms like pain, wound healing, disturbances, and non-union. Now, how do we choose an empiric antibiotic for bone and joint infection? This is very important because you are allowed to give an empiric antibiotic, but have to downscale it to a definitive antibiotic at the earliest you get your culture sensitivity reports. Now, a faint amount of idea to which one to choose. Suppose we are dealing with a closed injury, and there is the wound is antibiotic naive. So usually these are Staph aureus or the cons. So we can go for first and second generation cephalosporins or cloxacillin, ampicillin, cloxacillin combinations. And when there is a closed injury, multiple procedures, there is an exposure to antibiotic. Probably it can be a nosocomial infection. So here, antibiotic-free period of about 2 weeks. So if it's febrile or unstable, then we have to start with empiric like our carbapenems, like our targocid, I mean our this one piperacillin tazobactam groups, the vancomycin, the declofenac, and here again for treatment, local antibiotic cement, local drug delivery is important. Now, when we are dealing with an open contaminated wound, antibiotic naive it is, but because of the contamination, it is usually polymicrobial, anaerobes can be there, molds, and non-tubercular mycobacterium can be there. So again, here we use the groups like your piperacillin, tazobactam, the metronidazoles are also very important here. Now, when we are considering an open contaminated multiple procedure has been done and exposed to antibiotic, so here the antibiotic free period we have to look for pre-op more than about 2 weeks. If febrile unstable, then we have to give like our piperacillin tazobactams, the carbapenems, plus minus the vancomycin, the teicoplanin, and again antibiotic cement has got an important role as an empiric treatment. Now, approach to prosthetic joint infection and implant related infection. Suppose the duration of symptoms is less than 3 weeks, or the infection is within 4 weeks after the implantation of the implant or the prosthesis, and the implant is stable, there is no sinus tract, there is a susceptible pathogen identified prior to the procedure. If all this is present, then we can go for a debridement with retention of implant. The duration of the antibiotic based on the site implant infections usually for 6 to 8 weeks, and for THR, and it can be given up to 3 months, for TKRs up to 6 months, and we can consider chronic suppressive therapy. But if it is not, all the criteria doesn't meet, then we have, if we have a good soft tissue envelope and it's a hip replacement which has got a deep joint, susceptible pathogens are identified prior to the procedure, we can venture into one-stage implant exchange. When the damaged soft tissues, the abscess or sinus tract is susceptible organisms, then we have to go for two-stage exchange there. Usually the knee joint, it's better to go for two-stage exchanges. And when we have a situation where the microorganisms are resistant or difficult to treat, again, we should go for two-stage exchanges. But here again, with a longer interval between the two exchanges. And when it is inoperable, very moribund or debilitated or bedridden, then obviously long-term indefinite suppressive antibacterial treatment you can consider. Now, when unable to undergo second stage exchange of implants, no functional improvement after exchange, and poor bone stock, soft tissues, highly resistant bugs. So what we can plan here is implant removal without replacement, either you fuse the joint or go for amputation. So this is an algorithm which you have to again understand. Now coming to few things like pathogen specific antibiotics, if it is a methicillin sensitive Staph aureus, the drug of choice are flucloxacillin, flucloxacillin. These are not available in our country. The cefazolin is what, and alternative drugs is ceftriaxone and daptomycin. And rifampicin may be added in presence of an hardware. When it is MRSA, methicillin resistant, So it is usually the vancomycin and the teicoplanin are the drugs of choice. The other alternative can be linezolid or daptomycin. And in beta hemolytic streptococcus, again, this is the list where penicillin, ampicillin, ceftriaxone, and alternative drugs can be vancomycin. So this is the entire list, like penicillin resistant organisms of Pseudomonas, with the drug of choice are ceftazidime and cefepime. And the other drugs which can be given are piperacillin, tazobactam, meropenem. And like this is the entire list of all that. So oral antibiotic options for treatment. Again, you have so many oral antibiotic options for our treatment for all these bugs, beta hemolytic streptococcus, enterococcus, pseudomonas, enterobacteria, MRSA and MMSA. So we should also understand that and keep these referral systems with us. And etiology based on host and environment. Now here open injuries, gross contamination of soil, then usually we expect this to be gram-negative Enterobacteria, Pseudomonas, Acinetobacter, Clostridium, Nocardia, NTM, that is non-tubercular Mycobacterium, and environmental molds. Now, when it is like a recent healthcare contact, any lines or devices has been put, so it can be a Staph aureus or cons, Enterococcus, drug-resistant gram-negative bacteria, and the special hosts like somebody who's neutropenic and post CKD or post transplant. So these are the common bugs which can be seen based on the host and the and why I'm emphasizing on these slides is because based on this you can start your empirical therapy. Unless you have an idea about this, you cannot give a rational empirical therapy to your patient. So here, this is a chart which again tells you what is the dose, the proper dose, the right dose is again very important. It is like it is important to identify the right drug, the right dose is also important. So you can go through this standard dose. So we will go into slightly into what is surgical stewardship. So definitive treatment, empirical treatment, and prophylactic therapy. These are three important things. So evaluate the infection by your clinical diagnosis. The key important point in diagnosis is you have to spend time and select an appropriate antibiotic therapy regimen. That is, whether you are planning for a definitive therapy or empirical therapy, you have to give to save this patient because critical patients, the clinical's working knowledge or experience of what is the most likely to be the pathogen, especially in your hospital, in your center. So that is the best empirical treatment you can give. And prophylactic therapy, again, once you have a condition where pre-op patients, immunocompromised, special patients, or once you are dealing with traumatic injuries, all that we have to go for prophylactic antibiotic. So criteria for choosing an antibiotic drug, again, so the narrow spectrum antibiotic which should be cost effective, least toxic for the shortest duration possible. So these are to be the basic ideas in which we should give antibiotics. So if I'm always, once we are dealing with some surgeries, all of us are worried about infections. So we are most worried about our results, isn't it? So once we are like prophylaxis, it's better to consider a narrow spectrum antibiotic. And once we are having doubt of a life-threatening situation for our patient, then obviously we'll have to think about a broad spectrum antibiotic. Now, when we have to decide between monotherapy or combination therapy has its advantages because to achieve synergistic effect against the infections, but combination therapy does not mean that polypharmacy. We have to, there is standard combination which you have to be educated and understand, and we have to give it like that. Because combination therapy also shortens the course of antibiotic therapy. And once we are treating hospital acquired infections, so their combination therapy has got a role. Now, once we extend the antibiotic spectrum during polymicrobial infection, if you are suspecting a polymicrobial infection, so combination therapy has its advantage, and it definitely prevents development of bacterial resistance for where we have to give it for a long time. And we have to be again efficiently thinking about how my antibiotic is reaching my site of infection, whether it is reaching or not, and what is the amount of tissue penetration. So always, most of us in orthopedic surgery, we are more sort of comfortable with bactericidal drugs rather than bacteriostatic therapies. So the need for an antibiotic microbial therapy should be reviewed on a daily basis by reviewing your laboratory evidences. So every day you have to review, like you review the drug chart, you have to review your antibiotic microbial therapy and plan it accordingly based on the reports which you have sent. And on a daily basis, you have to, and at the earliest, you have to reduce it to a definitive treatment. And when it is a prophylactic antibiotic, you should not unnecessarily prolong its to prolong the can keep on continuous giving the prophylactic antibiotic. So all this is very important for us to understand, is because if you don't do that, then something happens where which is called as antibiotic resistance, or the super bugs, they come into play. What does not kill you, it only makes you stronger. So our strategy has to kill the bacteria. If you are not able to do, then obviously they are becoming stronger. So there is a rule of right. The right rule of right are the right medicine in the right manner must be followed while using antibiotics to the right patient at the right cost. So the 7 Ds of optimal antibiotic therapy: we should give the right drug, the right dose, appropriate directions, the route of administration, de-escalate to pathogen directed therapy. The duration of therapy should be right. The drug to drug interaction should be looked for. Always evaluate for possible immune deficiencies and conditions, so that you optimize your antibiotic use in clinical settings. So very, very important for you to know all these.
మాట్లాడతారు.
Now, coming to the algorithm for rational prescription of antibiotic therapy, once you are in an office setting, diagnosis, clinical diagnosis is very important. Spend time with your patient. If you suspect, does the patient have a bacterial infection? If no, withhold antibiotics. Investigate for potential focus of infection. If you are able to find somewhere some infection, then it's a different thing. But you are suspecting bacterial infection, and then you have to conduct a proper microbiological diagnosis. So interpret the microbiological results, evaluate the antibiogram, and prescribe a narrow spectrum antibiotic. Select an appropriate antibiotic therapy which is shortest in duration. This is about office practice. Once a patient is getting admitted, again, diagnosis is clinical, and you have to be very thorough with your diagnosis. Now, after a clinical diagnosis, is the patient prone to a bacterial infection? If it is prone, select an optimal antibiotic agent for short duration, essentially bactericidal, non-toxic, not very expensive, active agent, active against the typical pathogen. So that is very important for you to now know what probably can be the pathogen here, the things which we discussed in the previous slide. Now, in a hospital setting, having a proper clinical diagnosis, does the patient have a bacterial infection? You are still in doubt. Initiate a prompt empiric antibiotic therapy, because you are admitting the patient means there is probably the patient is sick. It's not that fun. So that is very important for you to start to save this patient. It is important for you to start the empiric antibiotic therapy in this setting, and target the most likely pathogen based on the site of infection, the age, and the prior antibiotic usage, and what is the your hospital antibiotic sort of protocols, and the bugs which are common in your hospital. So after conducting a proper microbiological diagnosis, interpret the antibiogram, and as early as possible, de-escalate this empiric therapy to a narrow spectrum antibiotic. And again, select an antibiotic that is you choose it for the shortest duration, and an appropriate antibiotic. So this is the entire algorithm through which we should go as we are doing our assessment of any orthopedic infection, or once we are treating any patient with orthopedic infection, whether it is a hematogenous infection or non-hematogenous infection. So the judicious use of antibiotic means, what do we mean by judicious use of antibiotics? Now, the prudent use of available antibiotic agent, proper use, take precautions for the control of cross transmission of resistant strains. We should take precaution for that. Isolate the carrier patients, obtain an accurate clinical diagnosis. Antibiotics should only be prescribed when they are required. And we must conduct more research to develop antibiotics with a novel mechanism. This is a big challenge, because if the way the speed with which we are developing superbugs, we are not able to develop new antimicrobial drugs in that speed. So that's the biggest challenge now. An antibiotic must be administered in a proper dose, proper interval, use the narrowest spectrum, shortest duration, switch over to oral agents as soon as possible. So repeatedly, these slides are repetitions because I want to repeat it time and again, which should make you understand. Now, antibiotic prophylaxis, as we have discussed, It should be made considering the specific germs of each hospital and their antibiotic sensitivity. So it is important for you to know what are the bugs you have and what are the bugs you suspect and the possible antibiotic sensitivity. Antibiotic treatment is not effective as long as source of infection. So antibiotic therapy is not a substitute for a proper surgical work. It is an addendum to the proper surgical work. Wherever you have a source of infection, whether it's an infected implant or a sequester, you have to surgically debride it and do a proper surgical work, and then the antibiotic only is of use help to us. And irrational use of antibiotics, it has resulted in the development of multi-drug resistant bacteria. Now, these multi-drug resistant bacteria are called the superbugs. So we should not have take the credit of being the country which produces most number of superbugs in this world. So to end my presentation, the human body, which contains about 10 to the power 13 cells, they routinely harbor about 10 to the power 14 bacteria. And these bacteria we call as microbial flora, gut microbial flora. So please do understand, they don't live in our world. We are living in their world. We are living in the world of the bugs. So thank you for your attention, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk for so long.
Thank you, Smarajit. That was an excellent, overview of the antibiotic treatment and how to rationalize the use of antibiotics in orthopedic practice. Now this is open for discussion. Anybody has any questions, any students? And first of all, let's have comments from our esteemed teachers. Kalra sir.
Excellent lecture, sir. Very difficult topic. I have some query. So
Yes,
it
sir.
is all in a very detailed note. Very difficult to remember at this my age. I just want to have a short brief. What do you do in your clinical practice if you have a bone and joint infection?
Sir, once we are encountering in our clinical practice any infection, the first thing is like we have to be properly discussing with the patient, spending time, and get a proper clinical diagnosis of an infection. That is the first and foremost thing. And once we are with a reasonable amount of clinical acumen, we are pretty sure that this is definitely infection or thinking towards in terms of infection. Then we have to start an antibiotic, which is not essentially very broad, and it's essentially should be a narrow spectrum antibiotic, which is depending on the bugs which are developing in our communities, or if it's in a if the patient was in a hospital setup, so whether it's a hospital acquired infection. So accordingly to that, we should find out an empirical antibiotic, start it off, and we send for culture and sensitivity. And at the earliest, whenever we get a culture sensitivity report which is positive, then we de-escalate the therapy and we continue it. And usually it should be changed over to an oral antibiotic as early as possible. And that's how we should be focusing on treating our osteoarthritis. And the most important thing, once we feel that there is some dead bone or there is a dead implant, I mean, an implant which is the cause of the persistence of the infection, and the implant is not holding the bone and loose. So definitely the surgical part is very as important as just starting of the antibiotic.
Thank you very much, sir. I think first we will take the comments from the faculties, then questions from the faculties, and students can post their questions on chat box, which I will take one by one. Sir, this is very important and least thought of and executed topic as far as we orthopedic surgeons are concerned, of course, with very few exceptions, sort of surgeons. So, Gopakumar sir, we would really love to listen to your comments, sir. Gopakumar sir.
Yeah, I think it was a great talk and he has covered almost everything. I just wanted to ask him what is the antibiotic prophylaxis which is acceptable for orthopedic surgery in a patient who has got penicillin sensitivity. Because if the patient is sensitive to penicillin, which antibiotic will you choose?
Patnaik sir.
Yeah, once the patient is sensitive to, this is again like once we are planning to start it as an empirical therapy, and somebody who's sensitive to penicillin, we can start the cephalosporins in those patients.
Yeah, because there is cross allergy between cephalosporins and penicillins.
Yeah.
So
Can I
the same.
Sir, go ahead, sir.
First of all, regarding the prophylactic antibiotics, usually, ideally, one should give a prophylactic. I'll talk about penicillin sensitivity a little later. Ideal prophylactic antibiotics should be a first generation or second generation cephalosporins. Like in United States, they follow the first generation cephalosporin as the first choice of prophylactic antibiotics. In UK, they follow second generation cephalosporin like efuroxime. But in our country, there is no specific guideline, so surgeons prefer their own antibiotics, prophylaxis. The ideal thing is that one should take cultures from their own setup every 6 monthly. Like if it is a big hospital, they have a hospital infection committee. Like in our hospital, we have a hospital infection committee. So every 6 monthly, they take swabs from their theater complexes, from the tables, from the air, from the anesthesia trolley, and wards everywhere, and see that which organism is a normal commensal to that particular setup, and see what antibiotic it is sensitive to. So accordingly, you select the antibiotic for prophylaxis. Next, regarding the penicillin, if the patient has got a true type 1 hypersensitivity, many patients they tell we are penicillin sensitive, but actually it is not a true hypersensitivity. True type 1 hypersensitivity must means the patient must have a history of anaphylactic reaction, which was treated with a your steroids, blah blah, whatever. If there's a true type 1 hypersensitivity, then the choice of prophylactic antibiotics should be vancomycin or clindamycin. And vancomycin, it has got its own, one should be cautious while giving vancomycin, because it has to be given over a period of 1 hour or 2 hours mixed with a normal saline. There is a, red man syndrome, all the, side effects of vancomycin is there. So it has to be given in a hospital setup. And if it is to given as a prophylaxis, it should be given minimum 1 hour before the surgery. Now, it is said that if the surgeon selects, inadvertently higher class of antibiotics for prophylaxis, he has got the lower confidence in his setup. That is the, saying what it goes. That's all what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much, sir. I think this was most important message from Mohanty sir's comment. Gopakumar sir.
Yeah, I just want to ask one more thing. Is there
Sir.
any difference in the timing when you give for the prophylactic antibiotics? Is there any difference in the timing between cephalosporins and vancomycin?
Patnaik sir. Mohanty sir.
Patnaik, yeah. Let him.
Yeah. It should be like within 60 minutes of the surgery or 10 minutes before the application of the tourniquet. But depending on any antibiotics, particular antibiotic timing, I don't think we have anything like that. It is like more of whether it reaches the system by the time we are doing the surgery. That is important.
The students are asking about the
No,
MCQ exam.
Should I add to that?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir, please.
Ideally, the prophylactic antibiotics should be given about half an hour before the skin incision, because especially in cephalosporins, because the peak serum concentration is achieved during that time. So what we tell, when the patient is wheels inside the theater, when the anesthetist put the IV line, that time the prophylactic antibiotics should be given. Then afterwards, induction, preparation, everything, it goes about half an hour, 45 minutes. So by the time you put the skin incision, almost half an hour, 40 minutes has passed. That is the ideal way. But if you're giving vancomycin, it should be given 2 hours before the, the skin incision, because vancomycin itself, it takes a long time to be given slowly, IV, slowly. So mostly there is no additional advantage of giving prophylactic antibiotics in the morning of surgery, night before surgery, or 1 day before surgery. There is no added advantage. Prophylactic antibiotics should be given ideally half an hour before the skin incision.
Right, sir.
Okay,
Gopakumar, sir.
thank you. Thank you.
Okay,
That
sir.
was the, because there is a often asked for to the students, that is why. Yeah.
Right, sir. Thank you very much,
Yeah,
sir.
yes.
Anything you want to add, sir? Gopakumar, sir.
And he has covered almost everything. The only thing is now there is a role for switching to oral antibiotics after 1 week of intravenous therapy in osteomyelitis and septic arthritis in children, depending upon the clinical response and CRP values.
Right.
So the surgeon side, that's the one thing which has come up. Because keeping the patient in hospital for 4 to 6 weeks is difficult. So if the patient is responding clinically well, and if the CRP levels are coming down, then we can switch over to oral antibiotic therapy and send the patient home. That is one thing which is given in the latest protocols.
In case of children, sir.
In children,
Yes,
yeah.
sir. In
Yeah.
pediatric age
So-
group.
Pediatric.
Pediatrics. Yeah.
Good.
Thank you very much, sir. Uday Kumar, sir, your comments, please.
It was a wonderful lecture, and all the C's are fulfilled. Crisp, concise, conceptual, and clear, sir. Patnaik, sir. This is our slogan from our Gopal Shinde, sir. All C's.
Okay.
And I thank Mohanty, sir, for roping in Patnaik, sir. This excellent lecture. And I think already repeated, my question is, what is the choice of narrow spectrum antibiotic before you avoid the culture reports, sir, in a major surgery? May, for example, say for any implant surgery, sir.
Yeah. So if it is a
What is the ideal antibiotic?
ideal antibiotic, no? Yeah. If it is like basically we think whether it's a open contaminated or a closed injury.
It's a closure, sir. Closure, sir.
Yeah, closed injuries usually the first, second generation cephalosporins. They are, but if it's a repeated surgery and the antibiotic exposure, patient is exposed to some antibiotic, in those cases we can think about carbapenems or vancomycin or teicoplanin. And that important thing here is in repeat surgery conditions in a closed injury. The other concept is, along with these IV antibiotics, we can even reduce the spectrum of these IV antibiotics by adding the local antibiotic delivery devices like bone cement or cement beads or antibiotic spacer. So that is also very important for us to understand.
Thank you, sir.
Kanuj, sir.
That synergistic
Sir, yes, sir. You want to continue, sir? Uday Kumar, sir.
The one comment by Mohanty, sir, for somebody starting higher antibiotic that has a low confidence in his theater setup, sterilization optimal condition. That is a excellent statement, sir. A very excellent statement for everyone. So
Correct.
if it's somebody, I have seen some centers I don't want to mention. One of my patient I have referred to Chennai, and that fellow was not given any antibiotic at all, no antibiotic. It was a non-union ulna. He was operated, but no antibiotic was given. I can't believe it even till today. So that is the confidence he has got in his theater setup. He hasn't given, sir. You can't believe my statement. It is a fact. But almost I like Ganga and other things where I was a visiting consultant for some time. Sorry, visiting observer. Observer. And they give like there's half an hour before surgery and 6 hours after surgery, and second day 1 dose and then stop. That's all. 3 doses.
That's the
Even in our
ideal.
hospital also we are also following that, sir, but so far we are happy. We are again same half an hour before, like you said, 1 hour before you are giving, sir. 1 hour before the skin initiation and 6 hours after the surgery. Next day 1 dose, third day 1 dose. Second day 1, third day 1 dose. We are staying with 4 doses, sir. We are no problem. With our theater setup, we don't have any problem. And fifth day onwards, we are switching them to oral antibiotics.
Kanojia sir, your comment, sir.
Yes, it was excellent presentation and most required because there is always dilemma about the antibiotic and lot of misuse and lot of loss of confidence. They start so many things at a time. And I want to ask, like Dr. Uday Kumar has said, how many days post-op? What is the regime post-op antibiotic Dr. Patnaik is giving?
But nice, sir, your
Okay.
protocol.
No, our protocol is same. Like once we are giving it for a clean implant surgery or a prosthesis, so basically concept here is we are giving the antibiotic as a prophylactic. So if it is for a prophylactic dose, so one shot we give 60 minutes before the surgery. The second dose is 6 hours from surgery. Then next day 1 dose. Then we stop.
That's all. And no oral after that.
Oral antibiotics, yeah, we change it to oral antibiotics.
How
after
many
that.
days?
No IV antibiotics. Oral antibiotics, second dressing. So usually for another 5 days.
Ideally, the literature tells us only 3 doses. No oral antibiotics should be given. There is no additional advantage of the oral antibiotic. It
Oral
only increases the cost, increases bacterial resistance, and also increases the healthcare cost. So there is no additional advantage, but some suggest continue to give for some time.
Sivananda sir, welcome from traveling to home place. Your comment, sir. I am aware. You were traveling by car and you were listening, and now you are at your home. And Partha sir, I will take your comment first and then Sivananda sir's comment. Partha sir.
Exactly, that is correct.
Partha sir.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, all.
Yes, sir.
Good evening.
Well,
Good
the
evening.
antibiotic rule, it was a very wonderful talk, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you,
And,
sir.
we have gone through this. Our microbiologist in the hospital gave us an antibiotic rule. We followed it for about 6 to 8 months. Somewhere, some people had some problems, lost confidence in the rule. Even though it was not very bad, we lost confidence in the rule and so came back to our own method of this thing. Generally, in my setup, like prophylaxis, then 2 days till I remove the drain, antibiotic is going on, IV antibiotics is given. And on the day I remove the urinary catheter, that day the patient will also get or till the catheter is there, the patient will get an antibiotic, and subsequently no other. Usually the catheter remains for about 3 days, and subsequently we remove the catheter, urinary bladder catheter, and then subsequently no antibiotics, even oral,
Okay, sir. Thank you,
both
sir.
in fracture fixation or even in joint replacements also.
Okay, sir.
There
Sivananda
is-
sir.
there is- One
sir,
point
yes,
I
sir.
would like
Please,
to
sir.
add here. There was a literature there, previously, that you continue antibiotics till some external device is attached to the patient's body, like urinary catheter, or some other thing, which are the drain tube. If you are keeping the drain tube, suppose take up a little longer, then continue antibiotic till that external device is removed, and then continue 24 hours after that. But nowadays, in most of the cases, we are taking out the drain and the catheter, if at all it is there, after 24 hours. So, it is not required unless it drains continuously, maybe some revision surgeries or some, re-surgery where the drain is more than 100 ml per 24 hours, then you may continue for one more, 24 hours more or 48 hours more. In
I
that
keep
case,
my
yeah.
joint replacement, both hip and knee, for about 48 hours, sir. If I do today, generally 2 days I keep.
Yeah, we learn by evolution rather than revolution. We have
Yes.
our own experience.
It
No,
is
I
more
used to
of
keep. Yeah,
more scared that something will happen.
yeah,
That is
yeah.
the
I
more,
know, I know. You know,
Yes, sir.
people are not keeping drains also now. Literature shows no
Yes.
drains in the joint replacement surgery. So
Yeah.
I have reached a stage where I keep 24 hours only now.
Yes.
I usually used to keep 48
Acha.
hours. Now I'm
If
content.
What about gram
if I've not
negative?
used a tourniquet, I don't put a. If I've not used a tourniquet, I don't put a drain, sir.
Okay.
Right.
Shivananda sir, Shivananda sir, your
Sam-
comment,
Sir,
your comment.
Samraj sir, it is a excellent talk and very difficult to speak on this. And Mohanty sir,
Yeah.
Mohanty sir and
Yes,
Samraj
yes,
sir, for you both, when there is a suspected infection, so we are going to debride it. Then if we want to keep the antibiotic cement with polymethyl methacrylate, how do you select which antibiotic will work at that particular time of debridement?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyhow, after debridement only, we have to keep the polymethacryl cement
And
with antibiotic.
I know.
So how do we know that this antibiotic will work?
Yeah. Smarajit, would you like to take? Or
Sir, you tell. Basically, it should be a thermostable antibiotic, and the usually we consider vancomycin or
Sir, here we are not able to identify
yeah.
the bug because
yeah.
after debridement by superficial cultures, it won't give you the type of the bug and what type of antibiotic to be mixed with the polymethyl methacrylate. The first time we are doing debridement and we want to prevent the infection, is
I'll
it empirical way only we will give the
No, I'll just tell you. You know, you have to mix the antibiotic which is thermostable, okay, and it will not alter the mechanical properties of the cement, and it will elute antibiotic in a greater concentration to the tissues, to the surrounding tissues. That is the choice of antibiotic, and amongst all the antibiotics, aminoglycosides is the best choice to be mixed with the cement. But one more important point is that liquid antibiotics should never be added to the cement. It greatly alters the properties of the cement. That's why in our country, at least all the aminoglycosides are available in the liquid form. We don't get, those in powder form. In abroad, they get in powder form. So that's why what we take, pre-mixed aminoglycoside antibiotic cements like, Palacus gentamicin or CMW1 plus gentamicin. And along with, we add vancomycin. Suppose you don't have any culture report in the hand, you add vancomycin with a gentamicin impregnated cement. So that takes care of almost all the organisms, gram positive, gram negative, as well as MRSA. But if you have a culture report in hand, or you know that what antibiotics, then you can add also cephalosporins, any kind of cephalosporins to the cement. You can add also this your ticoplan into the cement. You can add also colistin, all to the cement. So all these, antibiotics can be added to the cement. Since you are putting antibiotic impregnant cement as a temporary, antibiotic releasing factor, here mechanical properties of cement is not very important. But when you're using it as a finally fixation, for example, cemented hip replacement prosthesis, then amount of antibiotic is important. Maximum you should add about 500 milligram to 1 gram of antibiotic per 40 gram packet of cement. That means, your ratio, that ratio should be maintained. If you're adding more antibiotic, then cement will become, more porous, and it will become, weak cement, and that will lead to early loosening of the prosthesis.
yes,
Now,
sir.
nowadays we have this, stimulant, this calcium sulfate cement, which is available. It is very expensive, but extremely useful also. 10 gram costs around 25,000 rupees. But it is very useful because it gets absorbed inside it. The advantage is that you can put it inside the medullary canals and it will get absorbed. You can prepare those cement beads. There you should add for 10 gram of the, calcium sulfate cement to about 1 gram of vancomycin, or 1 gram of piperacillin tijavectam, 1 gram of whatever. Not too much of antibiotic to that, otherwise that will not set. So it will become difficult to set. So there is a big chart is there, which recommended in the literature. One can go through that. But commonly what I add, if the culture report is not available, is vancomycin in a gentamicin impregnated cement.
Thank you, sir. I would like to take question from the students. There is one question.
Gopal,
Yes,
just
sir.
one question.
Sir,
Do we use aminoglycosin if prophylaxis or post-operative also, like gentamicin or amikacin?
Yeah,
sir,
it-
sir.
Sir,
Yeah, Dr. Mohanty.
Sir,
yeah. You know, it depends on the, that's what I told you. If in your setup, for example, in our KM hospital infection committee recommends to use a cephalosporin plus amikacin as a prophylactic antibiotics. All our 13 theater complexes, they have taken swabs and they have seen that these are the commensal. Sometimes it comes as Pseudomonas, sometimes comes as E. coli, something like that. So they recommended that you should use a second generation cephalosporin plus aminoglycoside as prophylactic antibiotics. So at present, we are using, cefuroxime, cefaperazone, sulbactam plus amikacin as a prophylactic antibiotic. So it depends if your setup has got a gram-negative organism as a normal commensal, then you should add amikacin. Otherwise, it is not required.
Sir,
Dr. Patnaik, what is your regime? Because everybody, everywhere, they don't have that bacteriogram and everything. In normal cases, aminoglycosin should be used.
yeah, the aminoglycoside should be used because here gram-negative, our patients have some elderly patients, if they are prone to have multiple urinary tract infections. So in all those settings, it is probably important to have a coverage of the gram-negative bacteria also. But again, it is dependent on the case and what age of the patient, what type of characteristics the patient is having. So all these factors should take into consideration. Like as we choose any gram-positive antibiotic, similarly, we should also have, while choosing a gram-negative antibiotic, we should again have a similar type of situation where they can go. And if the gram-negative bacilli, as in Indian context, in India, the most commonly things are the gram-negative bacilli. That's what we have identified in our theaters. So in that setup, definitely we have a role of adding a gram-negative antibiotic in the prophylaxis and also as an empirical therapy.
okay, sir.
The
Thank you.
beauty of aminoglycosides is that they usually don't develop resistance.
Okay, sir. Sir, there is one question from student Mohanty sir and Patnaik sir. What would be ideal time to remove antibiotic beads?
Yeah.
Sir, Kumantu.
Yeah, antibiotic, the antibiotic beads, they release antibiotics maximum until about say 4 to 6 weeks, not beyond that. So you should take out the antibiotic beads if, clinically the patient is improving. No, if you see the clinically the patient is improving and ESR, CRP is on downward trend, then you can take out the antibiotic beads. Maximum, until about 4 to 6 weeks, not beyond that. Then it acts like a foreign body and it may lead to again infection.
Again,
Herbal infection. Yeah.
Sir, what about antibiotic coated nail?
Same thing.
Same thing.
Local antibiotic release is up to maximum 4 to 6 weeks. If beyond that the infection is not controlled, then you have to do another debridement and put another antibiotic coated nail or antibiotic bits like that. Otherwise, beyond 4 to 6 weeks, it doesn't have any role. It's just like a foreign body spacer.
Is there any role of application of
There is no
vancomycin
substitute
powder
for
on
debridement,
Yeah.
sir.
Listen to the question, sir. Is there any role of application of vancomycin powder on implant after fracture fixation or after fixing the prosthesis in surgeries like knee replacement?
No,
Mohanty,
there
sir.
is.
Yeah.
The students, question from students, sir. Because few people, they follow their own protocols. Students has asked these questions, means definitely he must have observed. Student must have observed that the consultant must be applying the this antibiotic, pouring antibiotic on the implant. Patnaik, sir.
No, it is not at all a good practice to just put some antibiotic on the implants. Neither it is good to use a betadine following a surgery, putting betadine into the wound. Usually these they don't act accordingly, because only when they are used as a method, and even while eluding the antibiotic from the biocompatible materials like PMMA, we have different ways in which we can increase the eludability of these antibiotics. So, and just by putting it in the powder form, it doesn't help, because with the blood and all the tissue fluids, the moment it is washed out, then it just loses its relevance in putting directly antibiotic over a wound.
Okay. Mohanty sir, there is one question I think which is not relevant to today's talk, but this is a practical question from students. How to treat superficial or deep surgical site infection?
Okay. Just I wanted to add little bit to the previous question that literature shows, some of the spine surgeons, they have used vancomycin powder instilled before the closure locally around the tissues, but not in other surgeries. Many surgeons, after doing a knee replacement, they give they put concentrated betadine inside the knee or some antibiotic impregnated solution inside the knee hip, but it doesn't serve any purpose, no additional role in preventing infection. So there is no role of local antibiotic powder in the clean orthopedic surgery. Regarding this question about wound infection, superficial or deep surgical site infection, first you have to diagnose infection. Suppose post-surgical period, post-surgical, what is the kind of discharge, whether it is a serous, serosanguinous, or no, seropurulent or purulent discharge. Suppose it is a serous discharge which is coming out of the surgery after 3 to 4 days of surgery. It may be in a localized, tissue necrosis, fat necrosis that may give rise to it. Their clinical judgment is extremely important. Whether there is any associated local inflammation around the discharge site. If there is any associated inflammation, then you have to wait for certain time. Just don't change the antibiotic in that case. Wait for some time, 1 or 2 days, whether you see that discharge is increasing or it is not going to stop, then you have to intervene, take him to the theater and then do a debridement locally. During debridement is extremely important to see that whether it is superficial to the deep fossa or deeper to the deep fossa. If it is superficial to deep fossa and there is no rent in the deep fossa, then just do a superficial wash and do a debride the margins of the skin and do a closure. Because if you enter into deeper structure, there is a possibility that you are introducing infection into deeper structures. But if it is gone inside the deep fossa, that means there's a rent in the deep fossa, then you have to go inside, go until the joint or go until the implant, do a thorough lavage and wash, and then close it and take material from inside, not from the sinus tract. Take it from inside, and at least there should be some tissue samples rather than the fluids. The tissue samples, you should send it for culture sensitivity. If it shows some bugs is growing, then you can change the antibiotic during that time after getting the culture sensitivity report. Don't just empirically change the antibiotic to a higher antibiotic. Another thing, post-operatively, suppose the patient have some fever, just don't change the antibiotic. Fever may be due to urinary tract infection. It might be due to chest infection. It is not due to your surgical site infection. So they tell that, again, as I told you, that the higher the antibiotic chosen by the surgeon, the lower the confidence in his setup. So just not that antibiotics are not antipyretics, so that it should not be given for the sole purpose of a rise in temperature.
I think this was a very nice one-liner for students. Low confidence, higher antibiotics. So remember these words. Sir, there is another question, I think, which is very relevant to your statement asked by the student. Do we have to start antibiotics in patients with elevated WBC count preoperatively? I think, Mohanty sir, what I feel, unless you know the cause, infection, we should not go for antibiotics. So your comment, sir, I would like on this question, comments from senior faculties I would like to take. Mohanty sir, start from you.
Yeah, if there is an increased WBC count before surgery, then you have to see what is the source, why there is an increase in WBC count, not just treat with the antibiotic. is that then send for a urine for culture sensitivity, look at the chest and see the source of, is there any infection? Rather we postpone the surgery, wait for some time and let the counts become normal, then only you take the patient for surgery, not just add an antibiotic, then you go ahead with the surgery. That should not be the protocol.
Thank you, sir. Gopakumar, sir. Your comment, sir. Kalra, sir.
Yes, sir. See, isolated WBC count is not taken as infection. So it is in relation to the septic workup. So there are a lot of parameters need to be investigated before we start antibiotic. WBC count only does not signify it is infection. So,
Right.
but it is one of the parameter. It should be taken in relation to the clinical setup, clinical findings, and other investigations. But surgery should be deferred till we get a normal CBC report.
Right, sir. Partha, sir.
I agree with Dr. Kalra, sir. WBC count can be an acute reaction in cases of trauma. Acute reaction in cases of trauma, you can get the next 2 days, you can get an increased WBC count. You have to, if it is a joint replacement case and all, if you have seen a WBC count higher, you should get a CRP, postpone your surgery, wait for the WBC count to come down. Even though there may not be any clinical reason for the WBC count, and you should check on his dental infections and other things, and the urinary tract, and see that there is no other reason for increase in the WBC count, and also the CRP. If it is trauma, if you have to do it very early, then you should go ahead. But in a joint replacement or a cold case, I would defer the surgery.
Right, sir. Patnaik, sir, your last comment regarding these questions, sir, because I have to take few more questions and I am having only 5 minutes with me. Isolated WBC count rise. Would you give antibiotic or you will evaluate and then only decide? Unmute, sir. Unmute, please. Patnaik, sir, unmute. We don't listen you.
Yes. So any inflammatory process can be also the cause for elevated WBC count. So it has to be always taken along with the clinical parameters, the other parameters, and if there is any clinical relevance to it, then we might consider. Otherwise, we need not even in a trauma setting, it does not necessarily indicate that it's an infection. So the inflammation caused because of the injury can also be the cause of elevated WBC count. So it has to be taken in combination of all the available findings and the clinical condition of the patient. And there is no role of increasing an antibiotic or giving antibiotic as a prophylaxis, because as we have discussed, should be ideally started about 60 minutes from surgery, 6 hours, and then one more dose. That's it.
All right, sir. Sir, there is one more question, but I think this question, I am going to give homework to the same student itself. Rationally, to use alcohol-based hand rub on skin staplers while changing the post-operative dressing. Totally irrelevant question to the today's talk. I request the PG students, please make a habit to ask the relevant questions. My advice to you is go on World Health Organization website, read about hand wash. The type of hand wash, only 2 types, soap water or alcohol based. It's a very beautiful, only 1 hour's course. So Ryudip Saha, are you there? Ryudip?
Yes, I am there, sir.
Yes, this is task to you. You will
Right.
make a short presentation on hand wash, and the ready-made material for you will be available on WHO website, and there is a very beautiful short course on the hand wash. Will that be okay to you?
Right, sir.
So next class, you are going to present this short presentation on hand wash. Okay, and that will clear
Okay.
your doubt also and everybody's doubt also. Sir, one more question. Last question I would like to take before concluding today's session. do we have to start antibiotics in patients who are advised for Foley's catheterization? And before asking this question to Patnaik sir, I feel students, if you think patient requires prolonged catheterization, is better you are working in the institution, take help of a nephrologist or urologist. And depending upon your indication to put the patient on catheterization, you should follow. Patnaik sir, your comment on this question, sir.
Yeah, I think we have already discussed that as long as we have a catheter or as long as we have an extra drain or some foreign body which is having a connection to the external world, it is probably important to continue with the IV antibiotics. And the moment we remove all that, there's no role of adding it or continuing with any further antibiotics.
Thank you very much, sir. Sir, before concluding, I'm working with Doctors Without Borders or Medicine Sans Frontiers as their emergency orthopedic trauma surgeon during war surgeries or in natural calamities. On this international platform, the most of the guidelines followed for the war surgeries or open wounds, they are based on the war surgery principles, and the worldwide accepted literature book is the book by the Red Cross. So there they are having 3 types of antibiotic protocols. Unfortunately, first class, these cefazolin type antibiotics or first class cephalosporins, they are not available what routinely followed. Duration, specific antibiotic, and type of bug. These are the 3 things they consider. So IV antibiotic, when to give, how much to give. So if this sort of class comes in future, I will make this presentation, Mohanty sir. The international.
Shinde sir, we would like to listen from you sometime about this,
Yes, sir. There is a specific protocol
lecture,
for the specific protocol for war surgeries and orthopedics related war surgeries. Specific protocol. And I always remember the word Lakir Ka Fakir. These organizations, they are very much stringent. You cannot use a single antibiotic out of their protocol. So I think we are having lot many things for standardization, which is not clear as far as our own country is concerned. The good antibiotic practices, prophylaxis part, how much dose in elective case, in emergency case, in chronic case. These all 4 parameters needs to be very well protocol wise, literature wise formulated, and I think only after that this topic will get true justice. I think, sir, thank you very much, Patnaik sir, from our joint Zoom class postgraduate teaching initiative family. Welcome to our family, and thank you very much for your excellent, clear, crisp, concept based, though literature itself doesn't have concept based understanding, for which our senior faculties, if we will take lead, like Mohanty sir, Gopa Kumar sir, Kalra sir, Uday Kumar sir, Shivananda sir, Partho sir, Kanoja sir, Kakatkar sir, all stalwarts are there, and of course Jayant Kumar sir. I think this is the area which needs lot of, because it is like this topic is totally relevant and can be compared with Corona. First lockdown of 10 weeks, everybody was afraid. Nobody was aware what is going to happen. And out of fear, थाली बजाओ, दिया लगाओ और घर के अंदर रहो. जो भी बोलेगा सब जायज था, सब मंजूर था. इसमें क्या हुआ? कुछ नहीं हुआ. सब ओवर कॉन्फिडेंट हो गए. So ओवर कॉन्फिडेंस was second stage. नतीजा क्या हुआ? सब लोग बुरी तरह से मुश्किल में फंसे, क्योंकि हॉस्पिटल में वेंटिलेटर के बेड ही नहीं मिल रहे थे. अब मिक्स पिक्चर है हमारा. प्रेजेंट स्टेट ऑफ कोविड इज मिक्स पिक्चर, कि डर भी लगता है और फॉलो भी करना है. शुरू में पता नहीं था, अब कम से कम थैंक्स टू इटालियन सर्जन्स वी आर अंडरस्टैंडिंग लिटिल बिट पैथोफिजियोलॉजी, एंड exactly in the same stage we all academicians and clinicians are there as far as today's topic of antibiotic is concerned. I think this is my take on this topic. Thank you very much for all the faculties and thank you very much, students. Mohanty sir, your concluding remark, and I am going to end this meeting. Your concluding remark, sir.
Thank you, Sindhu sir. On behalf of our joint Zoom classes faculty, we thank Dr. Smarajit Patnaik for elaborating,
Thank you, sir.
nicely on the rational use of antibiotics. It's not only the use of antibiotics, what is more important is the rational use of antibiotics and how to take a decision. And we have discussed almost everything during the discussion period. And Smarajit, thanks for your time. And we would like to invite you to this class whenever you have time. Every Tuesday and Friday we are there at 5:30. So we will make you include in the group and we will continue this. And thank you all. Let us
thank you all.
Yeah,
Good night.
Sir, you can